Good morning, and welcome everyone to White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church. This is a congregation in the free faith tradition, a community of youth, adults, and children bound not by creed, but by covenant. I'm Dana Boyle, and I use the pronouns she and her, and I serve on your board of directors. Whoever and wherever you are, you're warmly invited to join us for our social hour, either on Zoom or in the social hall. You'll be assigned to random groups when you arrive, and we'll begin 5 minutes after the postlude ends. If you're joining us for the first or second time, please fill out a guest card. The link is in the chat box for those of you on Zoom, or if you're joining us here in person, please fill out a yellow paper card that can be found at our Welcome Center. Speaking of social hour, coffee is back. Now we've made a little change. We're suggesting that people bring their own reusable mugs, which is a good conservation practice anyway. But if you've not brought one, we do have mugs available in the social hour for coffee, or social hall rather. So warm up your voices now and grab your cold weather gear, because we're having our second community sing outdoors. Not today, but we will gather this coming Friday at 2 p.m. outside the fire pit to sing some of our favorite songs together. Look for the registration link in the e-news. In addition to myself, service participants today include Reverend Jack, Reverend Sarah, Amy Peterson-Derrick, and Ann Galloway-Eggy, with behind-the-scenes support from Aaron Scott and Anna Garris. Music today is provided by Mary Duncan, the OK Factor, and the WBUUC Virtual Choir. A special thanks to the choir members who sent in recordings, volunteer choir director Jamie Staska, and Margot Berg for putting it all together into the recording that you'll hear today. Welcome to our church. Together we grow our souls and serve the world in love.
Come in. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together we make it a holy place, and welcome. Ann Galloway-Eggy will lead us in our chalice lighting.
Good morning.
Most days, I sit to meditate, and I wrap this prayer shawl around me. I got this prayer shawl after my father-in-law died in hospice in 2007. Nobody else wanted it. The Lutheran Church in Chatfield, which he and his wife and his parents helped found, gave it to him. When I wear it, I join with them and millions of others, living and dead, in countless religions, taking the time to say a prayer or meditate to start the day. Perhaps others wear a shawl and call it a tallit. They use rosary beads or prayer beads of some sort, face east for prayer, or tend an altar. My ritual of wearing this shawl for meditation ripples out and connects me with countless others. It reminds me that I am part of an interconnected web. This ritual grounds me in gratitude and my intention to be a kind and compassionate person. Often I think of Mary Oliver's poem, Why I Wake Early. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who make the morning and spread it over the fields and into the faces of the tulips and the nodding morning glories and into the windows of even the miserable and the crotchety. Best preacher that ever was, dear star, who just happens to be where you are in the universe, to keep us from ever darkness, to ease us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now how I start the day in happiness, in kindness. We light the chalice today for the many rituals that we use to ground our days in happiness, in kindness, and gratitude.
Please join me in the opening words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. For our opening hymn, I want to take a moment to acknowledge how hard it is not to hear these hymns being sung. Following the advice of our medical protocols team, we will be installing a plexiglass shield and incorporating a song leader into the worship service soon. In the meantime, I want to read the lyrics of this powerful hymn to you so you can hear the words wash over you. These words are for you, and they are also for your neighbor. Hold them with an open heart. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. Please rise in body or spirit to hum along or sing if you're on Zoom.
Good morning. I am so honored to be one of the people here on staff that gets to consistently share stories with you all. This practice has helped to remind me that storytelling is not just about the words themselves, but about the power of a shared experience of story. Sometimes we add to this experience by also engaging in a sacred reading practice that invites us to experience the text in an even deeper way than we might if we were to just read the words by themselves. Some of you might be familiar with a sacred reading practice that we've been inviting you into called Florilegium. It's the practice of finding a sparklet of wisdom in a story, a text, even an experience, and then sharing the sparklet back into a group or jotting it down into a journal. Listening for sparklets invites us to be present to a text or an experience in a different sort of way. We might assume a different posture when we prepare ourselves to be the recipient of the gift of wisdom. These practices help these stories become a part of us in a new way, a different way, not just in our minds, but also woven into our hearts. Another sacred reading practice that we have used often with children and youth, and one that Nico and Jack have introduced here as a part of the service in the past, is called Decenter and Receive. This, again, is a practice that invites us to assume a different posture, to listen in a new way, and to do the spiritual work of centering what ought to be centered in that moment. It allows us to receive a new story as sacred, centering the storyteller's experiences rather than our own. And the practice goes like this, and I'm going to invite you to practice it with me this morning. I'm going to hold out your hands and imagine that you are holding all that you know, everything, all of your stories and experiences all in your hands. And just sit with that for a moment. Feel the weight of these stories in your hands, these experiences in your hands. And take a breath. And move all that you are holding into just one hand. And wrap your fingers around them, holding it there safely, holding everything you know there safely. And sometimes when we hold these things, we might tuck it away safely to access again later, to then mingle with our new learnings. But for now, we're just going to hold this one open hand in front of us, holding space for a new story. And it is in this open space where wonder and awe and curiosity and gratitude can live. And take another breath. And pay attention now to the posture of your body, of your heart, of your mind, of your spirit as you hold space to receive the gift of another story in your hand and in your heart. Do you feel different than you did a moment ago? One of my favorite times that we have practiced Decenter and Receive with children and youth has not only been just before we share a story together, but also before we practice our check-in ritual with one another. During this ritual, we take time to go around our circle that's gathered, and we share our names, our pronouns, and we invite all to share one thing that they are holding in their hearts that day. For example, I might say, my name is Amy, my pronouns are she, her, and today I am bringing with me gratitude to be here with you all. Even if we have all introduced ourselves to one another a million times before, we always start with this check-in ritual to hold space for intentional naming, not just in case there is someone new in the circle, though that's important too, but also to recognize that we are shifting our understandings of who we are all the time, and there is power in practicing making space for naming. When we practice Decenter and Receive before this ritual, we are reminded to hold names and pronouns also as sacred text. It reminds us that our identities are a story for each and every one of us, and these stories are powerful and sacred. It calls us to be intentional. I intend to hold space for you. I intend your sharing of your name and pronouns to be sacred to me. I intend to recognize my own as sacred. So take a breath. And let's hold some space for ourselves and one another for a moment. Hold out your hand once more, holding space for one another and for yourselves. remembering that sharing our names and pronouns, sharing who we are with one another, is a sacred gift. Take a breath, and if you feel comfortable, I invite you now to speak into the silence or just hold silently in your heart your name and pronouns. And take a breath. You are a gift.
Join me in continuing in the spirit of meditation and prayer as we have just been. Make sure your body is in a comfortable spot, doing a comfortable thing, and take a few centering breaths. Feel and release the tension you're holding in your body. And remember our interconnectedness. This morning we honor in love and in grief the lives lost to gun violence, to hate, to fear, lives lost to systemic white supremacy culture deeply ingrained in our nation's laws. We honor the frustration and outrage that many are feeling after the verdict recently handed down for Kyle Rittenhouse, not guilty of murder of 2 Black Lives Matter protesters for reasons of self-defense. We honor in love and in grief the documented deaths of 45 trans people in the United States in the last 12 months, and probably more than 400 killed internationally, and the unknown number of trans people who died with no recognition. Each of these people were humans with full lives, families, friends, partners, people who love them. They are more than numbers would indicate. We honor their lives, their pronouns, their gifts, now lost to the world. We honor and love these members and friends of our congregation who have submitted requests to be held in the meditation time in our new form found in the e-news, and a slip of paper in the prayer bowl, or have entered their request into the chat box or will do so shortly. We have about 45 people in the room this morning, and we have about 58 screens online. So together, all of those present hold Laura Stone-Girage, who had a fall and broke her hand and is recovering now from surgery to repair the bones. She very generously has been our guest pianist over the last several months, and we will miss her playing for us as she recovers and her hand can heal. We hold Kathleen Keating and her grandnephew Calder, her sister Maureen Keating's grandson. He is nearing his goal of having his feeding tube removed 15 years after being born as a micro preemie. And now let's speak the names of those in our hearts into this space so that we may all hold them together. So into and out of this silence, speak the names you would like us to hold. We have room in our hearts for all. Amen.
Today, the Social Action Committee's special collection is for the Minnesota Unitarian Universalist Social Justice Alliance, also known as Moose Jaw. Moose Jaw is rooted in the UU understanding of the worth and dignity of all humans and our interdependence with all creation. Its goal is to empower both UU individuals and UU congregations to be skilled, accountable, faithful partners working for justice and collective liberation. This is the UU organization that coordinates the justice activities of Minnesota UU congregations, including action on voting rights, racial inequity, immigration, climate change, and LGBTQA justice. It is important for WBUUC to give them our support. Please be generous. As always, you can donate in 3 ways. On the WBUUC webpage, send a check or leave a check in the locked box outside the front office, or use the text to give option. No matter how you give, please indicate the word justice. Thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life that we live together.
Our first reading is Working Together by David White. We shape ourselves to fit this world, and by the world we are shaped again. The visible and the invisible working together in common cause to produce the miraculous. I'm thinking of the way
the intangible air passed at speed round a shaped wing easily holds our weight. So may we in this life trust to those elements we have yet to see or imagine, and look for the true shape of our own self by forming it well to the great intangibles around us. The second reading is from Gwendolyn Ann Smith. The Transgender Day of Remembrance seeks to highlight the losses we face due to anti-transgender bigotry and violence. I am no stranger to the need to fight for our rights and the right to simply exist first and foremost. With so many seeking to erase transgender people, sometimes in the most brutal way possible, it is vitally important that those we lose are remembered and that we continue to fight for justice.
Sometimes I feel like a broken record. I can't even count the number of times I've stood in this pulpit or maybe preached over Zoom from my house and reminded y'all that change is one of life's many constants. It's a common refrain, but it's true. And sometimes when faced with this barrage of change, we are just filled with equanimity, can handle any change that comes our way like some kind of desert plant buffeted by intense winds and drought and thriving anyhow. And if that's how you feel today, I'm glad, good for you. But for the rest of us who are feeling thrown around and discombobulated, please know that you are not alone. We're in this together. Sometimes the constancy of change can be a little overwhelming, and we just need an anchor point. My best friend has a sailboat, and he told me a story about an evening this summer while he was sailing, and the wind blew him into the corner of a lake. Now, I know what you're thinking. Lakes don't really have corners. They're more like pockets of shoreline, but you know what I mean. Sitting there in the northeast cove of the lake, he was unable to get back to his anchor point. His little trolling motor couldn't overtake the wind, and he had to wait out the storm. He wasn't able to make it to our scheduled pickleball league match, so we had to forfeit, but that's neither here nor there. But this visual of being stuck in that cove of the lake has really stuck with me. Sometimes the winds of change are just blowing too hard and we get stuck. Amidst all this change, rituals help us in a couple ways. First, some rituals mark and honor the changes that are underway. We use these rituals to mark off a transition from an old way of being to a new one, from an old status to a new one. Think weddings, commencements, marking the line between single and married, between student and graduate. And just a quick societal side note, we are much more comfortable with the rites of passage that are joyful and those that mark progress. But we also need rituals and rites of passage to help us mark and memorialize the sorrows and the challenges. Think about memorials or divorces. We who survive these deaths and losses still need a way to mark them and to open ourselves to the transition that comes while we grieve the loss and incorporate a new way of being into our minds and bodies. We must let our psyches adjust. Rituals also help to ground and center us when we are overwhelmed. We might be numb from all that's happening or submerged with the swirls of change. When our weeks blend into other weeks and our days into other days, we benefit from regular rituals. Some of those are our everyday rituals, and Sarah will be preaching about that next week. Some of them are weekly rituals, and regular worship is one of them. No matter how hectic or empty or full or monotonous our week has been, we always know we can attend a service with this very community. We can take time out of time to pause and to wonder, to consider things of worth and depth, to connect with others who share our values, to ponder, to question, and to engage in the mysterious intangibles that make up our world. In his poem, Working Together, David White says, "We shape ourselves to fit this world, and by the world are shaped again. The visible and the invisible working together in common cause to produce the miraculous." I'm thinking of the way the intangible air passed at speed round a shaped wing easily holds our weight. In this metaphor, I wonder how we can shape the wing so that when the air passes by, it can hold up our weight. What shape have you needed to take in order to handle all these changing winds? What has worked for you? Our weekly worship service here provides a potential touch point, a consistent point in time by which to measure the changes of the seasons, the turning of the liturgical calendar, and the changes happening within and around us. Every week, without fail, whether your life is chaotic or calm, we say the same words for our call to worship. Every week, you have the same opportunity to connect with other members of this community, whether over Zoom or over masks in the social hall. There are definitely many trappings of our church that look different right now, but so many of the kernels underneath remain the same: belonging, reverence, service, welcome, spirituality, justice, compassion, and music. Right now, our watchwords are flexibility and adaptability. We're in an age of reshaping and innovation. We're continuing to try new things and try old things in new ways. My hope is that we'll make the right adjustments to the shape of our wings so we can still soar uninterrupted. As David White encourages us, so may we in this life trust to those elements we have yet to see or imagine and look for the true shape of ourself by forming it well to the great intangibles about us. As we go about this sacred work of forming the shape of our life, we also think about the yearly rituals that we shape and which shape us. Some rituals still work and help, while others need reinvention or removal. Thanksgiving, as a holiday, has such a complex and painful history, especially as it pertains to the treatment of Native peoples both historically and presently. There are elements of the holiday worth saving and reframing for sure, family time being one and gratitude another. But the inaccurate history of Native involvement and the erasure of the mistreatment, abuse, and genocide of the Native peoples by the colonizers need to be reckoned with and addressed. This year actually marks the 51st anniversary of the time when Frank Wamsuta called upon hundreds of Indigenous Americans and their allies to gather in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and declare Thanksgiving a national day of mourning for Native Americans. Many people across the country mark this coming Thursday not as Thanksgiving, but as the anniversary of that initial protest. Many of our rituals and traditions need reshaping and recontextualizing so we can honor the true complexity of what is and what should be celebrated. Another yearly tradition that I think about at this time of year is the Transgender Day of Remembrance. Taking place on November 20th, it is a day set aside to honor the transgender lives lost to bigotry and violence. Started in 1999 by Gwendolyn Ann Smith and others, it provided a counter-narrative to the silence from other major media outlets when our trans siblings were killed. Often their stories were ignored, and if they did make the news, they were often misrepresented. Their dead names were used, and the newscasters failed to use the pronouns they had used in life. Gwendolyn and others wanted to amend that indignity, even though they couldn't undo the deaths. 22 years later, there are thousands of cities across the globe that memorialize the trans lives lost to violence. More than a decade later, a trans woman in Michigan started thinking about how sad and depressed she felt every year after the Trans Day of Remembrance. She wished there could be a different day centered on the lives of trans people that wasn't just mournful. So she thought up the yearly tradition of recognizing trans people who were still alive. She called it Trans Day of Visibility, and it's now celebrated every year on March 31st. It's this practice of centering the lives and experiences of trans people that points us to start every interaction here at White Bear UU with an introduction of our names and pronouns. Like in Amy's story, this is a helpful way to create this space for people to share with us the sacred gift of their story. By sharing the name and pronouns you want us to use for you, you're giving us a gift. It is a tender one for us to hold, and we aspire to hold it well. And because we recognize that we all change and grow, we are also giving each other the space to use a new name or new pronouns. You know, many of you probably don't know that the actual name assigned to me at birth is John Michael. It treated me well for a time, but it got me to the point when I was around 23 when the name John just didn't really fit me anymore. I was actually in the process of coming out, and I was trying my hardest to engage the power I knew I had. I wanted to call my own shots and live by my own rules, but it's difficult. My whole life up until then, I was known only by one name, but I wanted to try on a new one. As it turned out, I ended up moving to Boston after college, and that became the perfect opportunity. No one there knew me, so I was able to reinvent myself. I introduced myself as Jack, and no one asked me, "Is that your birth name? Let me see your ID." They just called me Jack. Looking back, I see now that my name change had a lot to do with the process of coming out. I needed to create space to grow into a more authentic and powerful person, and changing my name gave me that permission. The name John felt limiting to me in that moment, and it reminded me of the limits that people who knew John would put on me. I needed to shake free of those limitations so I could fly free. When I came back to the cities and bumped into an old friend, I was able to say, "Hello, I go by Jack now." And along with it, I can imply or even say, if I felt bold enough, that the name change wasn't the only thing that was different. It became a symbol for other changes in my life, and I was so grateful to have that time and space to experiment and explore. I've gone by Jack now for almost half my life, but I still sometimes turn my head when someone says, "John." But for now, I'd love for you to call me Jack, and I use he, him pronouns. May we be a place here at White Bear, where people can ask us to use a new name or a new set of pronouns for them. May we celebrate that act as the act of courage and trust that it is. Let's not force people to move to a new city if they need space to transition or express a new side of themselves. May we also be a place held together by ritual, but also adapting and innovating them as needed. May it be so, and make it so. Amen. Our closing hymn is We Gather Together, number 349 in our gray hymnal. Please rise in body or in spirit as you hum along, or if you're home on Zoom, please feel free to sing.
There's no option to unmute. What do I do? Okay. Okay. As always, feel free to join us for coffee and our social hour on Zoom or in the social hall 5 minutes after this morning's postlude. When you arrive, you'll be assigned to a randomized small group. And for now, please join me in the closing words. May peace dwell within our hearts and understanding in our minds. May courage steel our will and love of truth forever guide us.
May we be agile and adaptable, remaining open to the growth in store for us. May we continue to gather together as a community of continuity and newness, journeying together in hope and in care. Go in peace.